Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Green Flag. I'm your host, Lukas Wacker, and with me, as always, we have Kyle Cushman. And what a weekend it was in motorsports with the Turkish Grand Prix. That track is quite the storyline in itself. It was quite the action on the track, and we have a great storyline that comes out of it as well. And we've also got a couple of little news and notes on the NASCAR silly season side of things, and as well as history in the making on the broadcasting side of things. So a couple of things to talk about on that side of things, along with the race recap. And then we also have the 12 hours of Sebring to kind of quickly discuss as well. So before we get into that, how are you doing today, Kyle, after crazy weekend of racing, I guess?
Yeah, it was definitely strange not having any NASCAR or anything over the weekend. It just didn't feel right. It had been way too long since anything like that happened. But I got to say, F1 picked a fantastic weekend to have a banger of an entire weekend, because even like the free practices and obviously qualifying was insane. And then the race itself was one of the best of the year. So definitely a great weekend from F1 made up for it as well. And then obviously championship weekend in IMSA. So even though there was no NASCAR, still got the racing fixing for the weekend.
Yeah, we're coming down to the end of it, though. This is 3 races left to go on the F1 calendar after this one. So we're coming down to slim pickings, I guess, for the remainder of the 2020 Motorsports calendar season. So before we get into Formula One, we'll start off with the kind of news section of the show. Jamie Little, obviously, is a Fox reporter here on a consistent basis, has been since 2015 after ESPN lost the broadcasting rights. She would work with them previously, but now she's over at Fox, and she is set to make broadcasting history in 2021, as she will become the first woman named as the television voice of a national motorsports series. Little will take over for the play-by-play or the lead commentator for the ARCA Menard series in 2021. So, and she'll also continue her normal role as pit reporter for the Xfinity and Cup series as well. So it's just an added bonus that we get to see Jamie Little, probably my favorite female within the NASCAR scene. She's remarkable at her job. She's incredible. I've seen her do some stuff when I've gone to the races, and I've just seen her running through the garage area trying to find these reports and talking to people. She's well beloved within the industry, so this is a great opportunity for her, and it's great to see somebody like Little getting this chance in the broadcasting side of things. We're always going to be a sucker for it in the sport media program on the broadcasting side of things, but this is an important step in the right direction for motorsports, having a female leading the way for broadcasting. Usually it is traditionally a male voice leading the way, and widely they're all males in the booth. But this is a great opportunity for Little, and I wouldn't want anybody else but her getting this chance to make history, Kyle.
Oh, no, it's awesome. And as you mentioned, they're one of the best, one of, I think, a lot of people's favorites in the garage area, not just of the female representation in the sport, but I think regardless, she's been around the sport for as long as I can remember and has consistently been one of the best at her job. And it's going to be great to see her in this new role and breaking barriers doing so. It's still very, very rare to see a woman in a lead role in a booth doing play-by-play across North American sports, and to see NASCAR kind of breaking barriers in that regard is great to see. Obviously, ARCA isn't the big sexy title or anything like that, but it's a great place to start and just kind of get your feet wet and see where things go on from there. It's going to be great to see her in that role. I'll definitely be tuning into more ARCA races next season because of that. Don't know what the field will be like in terms of some new drivers in that rank, but having Jamie Little leading the way is going to be really great to see. Excited to see how she'll do in that role, and hopefully in 2-3 years time when she really gets the ropes in that role, maybe we can see her make the jump up to something like trucks or maybe even more. Who knows? But yeah, it's great to see her in that role. Awesome seeing the story that it was Lee Diffie actually that pushed her into that just kind of created the situation, which is great to see. Definitely a fantastic day for representation in motorsports.
Yeah, I'm stoked for her. It's going to be a great thing to hear. And she's a great pit reporter, and she's excelled at that. So I can only imagine that she's going to do great things in the broadcast booth as well. So, and I mean, when I watched the ARCA broadcast this season, it was kind of stale at some points, not just because the racing was kind of stale, but the broadcast booth isn't the greatest. But Jamie Little should hopefully spice things up there and revive it in a sense. So I'm very happy for her, and I can't wait to hear her voice in the booth next season. Hopefully they'll be able to go to the track as well. I know that's a big thing, especially for a first-timer. I would love to see her actually be able to go to the track. She's going to be a pit reporter, so I imagine she could do that responsibility of going to the track and being in the booth. I hope that's the case across all series next season. I hope Fox is able to go back to the track and not have to use the remote broadcasting studio. And we saw NBC kind of perform that later in the season there, so it works. So hopefully Fox can do that, and it helps break that little bit of a barrier for the first, especially for a first timer and Little, to be at the track and see it from the broadcast booth point of view. So very happy for her, and I just wanted to lead the show off with that because that was obviously definitely. After some kind of down spots on the broadcasting side of things that we talked about on Friday with Alan Cavana and Chris Devoda being let go of their responsibilities within the NASCAR media industry, I guess. It's great to see that we have a bit of a positive one here with Jamie Little. So we'll start off with that, and then we move on to NASCAR's silly season, I think, here, Kyle. Two notes here that kind of shocked us. We'll start off with the Xfinity Series before we get into the Cup Series one. Jeb Burton finally gets that full-time ride in the Xfinity Series for Kaulig Racing next year, as he's going to replace the departing Ross Chastain in the number 10 car. Huge opportunity here for Jeb Burton. Has been running part-time for Junior Motorsports on many occasions, I think, for the past 2 seasons, I believe now. It's been quite the whirlwind in that number 8 car, to say the least, for many drivers who have experienced the behind the wheel of that car. So this is a great opportunity for Jeb Burton. I still remember him behind the wheel of the truck, of the number 4 truck in the Camping World Truck Series back then, just getting pole after pole, and just couldn't quite get the results in the Truck Series, and never could find the funding to bring in the sponsorship for him to run a full-time basis. So huge opportunity here to go into a very consistent ride that Ross Chastain proved that he was in this past year. And Jeb Burton getting that finally getting that one shot here to prove himself in the top 3 levels of NASCAR, Kyle.
Yeah, it's a great shot for him, and to finally land that full-time ride for so many seasons now, doing part-time duty with solid teams, smaller teams, basically everything and anything that he could get behind the wheel of, he was doing. So it's great to see somebody like that finally get that stability and get to show what he can do, because this is a 10 car that finished 3rd overall in season-long points. Ross Chastain was very consistent in that car. Wasn't able to go out and win a race necessarily this year. He did so the previous year, funny enough, but he was consistently in the top 10, was consistently finishing. And if you think back to the season, some of the highlights of the season involved Chastain battling for the lead multiple times. So this is a front-running car, and you would expect Jeb Burton to be in that conversation as well. This season, in the famed number 8 car, that basically anything and everything that could go wrong did go wrong. When he was able to finish the race, when there wasn't any kind of wreck he was getting involved in or mechanical issues or anything like that, he was pretty solid. You look back to a 4th place at Martinsville being the most recent result for him, solid top 5 there. 2nd place at Richmond is probably the standout finish of the year for Jeb Burton there. But yeah, wasn't in the car a ton this year, so tough to really get a true read. And there was a couple times that there was the back-to-backs where Hemrick would be in one and Burton would be in the other, but it seemed like anytime that happened, one of the two had an issue, so you couldn't even compare them head-to-head. But that being said, the 2 guys that split the 8 car this season, both getting full-time rides in Xfinity is great to see, just from people getting either second chances or really in Burton's really kind of his first opportunity at this level in this kind of equipment. So it's great to see in that regard. I would have preferred to see somebody who maybe has a bit more of a track record, like a Brett Moffitt, get that ride. But if that wasn't an option, I got to say you could do a lot worse than Jeb Burton. Going to be interesting to see where he kind of stacks up against the rest of the Xfinity field next year. Doesn't seem like we're going to be adding anybody else in terms of big names or guys you would expect to be necessarily top 5 contenders, unless we get maybe a couple wild cards in there. Depends what happens with the RCR seat, I think is kind of the big one. But that being said, Chastain was top 5 a lot last year, finished 3rd overall in season-long points, so you know that the car is there. Justin Haley as well finished 5th overall, so you know that Kaulig is right up there with the rest of the garage area now. This isn't the days where they were 11th, 12th, barely making the playoffs. This is a legit contending team now, and you would expect Jeb Burton to go out, contend for a win a couple times in the season, comfortably make the playoffs and go out and make a long playoff run. And that's something that he hasn't had the opportunity to do because he hasn't been a full-time driver in a while. So excited for this opportunity for Burton. It's going to be fun to see Harrison and Jeb as well full-time and competing. That's going to be fun to see. And great to see Kaulig giving another guy kind of this opportunity to show what he can do.
Yeah, it was great to see the emotion that he showed during like the promotional video that they sent out. You could tell how much it meant to him, and why wouldn't it? I mean, this is a great opportunity for him to go into a competitive ride here and go full time, and maybe even go for an Xfinity Series championship next season. So, huge opportunity there for Jeb Burton. Very happy for him, and we'll see what he is able to accomplish next season. And that was something we talked about last week on our Friday episode that kind of got delayed due to circumstances. But we were skeptical on whether Kaulig would come with 2 full-time cars next season, with Allmendinger maybe being the guy that they would maybe put into that seat if they do go full-time. There's still a potential for maybe a 3rd car full-time because Allmendinger did run that 3rd car quite often throughout this past season. But it's proved not to be the case. Jeb Burton is their guy, and hopefully we see Allmendinger getting those part-time roles as well. But I think they're lining him up for maybe a potential full-time Cup Series ride if they were to go full-time in 2022 with the new car. It just makes sense for that organization to have a veteran go into that team like Allmendinger, who has Cup experience in the past and is a race winner in the Cup Series as well. So we'll see what happens on that front. But for 2021, Kaulig is rounding out their lineup for right now with Justin Haley and Jeb Burton. So formidable duo over there for next season. We'll see what they are able to accomplish, and it definitely doesn't allow a guy that was maybe like a Brett Moffitt or Jeremy Clements or somebody like that on the outside of the point situation to maybe sneak their way in with almost a certain lock here in Jeb Burton making the playoffs just based off of the competition level that's in the Xfinity Series that we see for next season. So any final thoughts there on Jeb Burton, Kyle?
For starters, it's great to see that they are continuing the 10 car in full time, obviously, with Chastain going up. And they were previously a single car team, so we didn't know if they would maybe size back down with them planning to go to Cup in a couple seasons, maybe save some dollars in that regard. So it's good to see that they're continuing their efforts in the Xfinity Series while bulking up to go Cup racing. And yeah, you mentioned some of the Cup stuff there. Doesn't seem like Allmendinger will be going full-time in Xfinity this season, which is something that we maybe thought could happen with that 10 car opening up. What it does mean, though, is that we'll be seeing a 3rd Kaulig entry in multiple races next season in Xfinity, which is going to just add to the competitive level. And what also means that we've got now 3 different drivers potentially that could go up to the Cup Series in the plate and road courses that we expect Kaulig to go and run in. You would expect maybe Justin Haley to run the super speedways and then Allmendinger to run the road courses, but who knows? Maybe they can mix things up at super speedways or whatnot. We'll see what happens in that regard. Maybe Allmendinger does all the Cup races, or maybe they split it. Who knows what they end up doing? That hasn't been confirmed yet. But it's great to see somebody like Jeb Burton land at a place like Kaulig, who has kind of been a place to give some second chances here these last few seasons. You look at Allmendinger being kicked out of his ride with JTG, going over to IMSA, and then slowly getting back into the NASCAR side of things in the Xfinity Series, and seems to be having a great time over there at Kaulig. Justin Haley, kind of a second-rate prospect, wasn't necessarily affiliated with anybody coming up, had the GMS ride, took a shot, kind of both sides took a shot on Kaulig, with Kaulig taking a shot on Haley as a youngster to kind of bring up, and Haley taking a shot on Kaulig as being a team to take the next step. And then obviously Ross Chastain had been a guy who had been just trying to land somewhere for much of his career, got a shot at Chip Ganassi, was supposed to be running there, and then we know the story of everything falling through there, going over to the Nice Motorsports side of things in the Truck Series, running a few races for Kaulig and parlaying that into this season when he finished basically every single race inside the top 10 and finishing 3rd in season-long points, just barely missing out on that championship 4 as well. So it's been great to see the progression of this team, and adding like somebody like Jeb Burton just kind of adds to the story of this team.
Yeah, perfectly said there. I think It's going to be if there's going to be a decrease in performance there with Chastain. You just saw how consistent he was. Didn't quite get that breakthrough win like we discussed it on this show at length. But this is a great opportunity for Jeb Burton, and we'll see how he matches up against a prospect in Justin Haley that is lining up for a Cup Series ride here within the next year or two, I'd say. Just based off of how Kaulig likes to rotate with their drivers, and Haley seems like he's a perfect fit for a team that could go for a restrictor plate or super speedway. Damn it, there it is, super speedway win.
In the jar.
Yeah, there it is. I think I'm at like $50 on the year, but
oh geez, I don't want to tally it up.
Nonetheless, we'll see how Jeb Burton does in his first full-time ride in a very, very long time. So that does it for Jeb Burton, I think, Kyle. And now we move into probably the biggest one that came out of
biggest surprise.
The second field next to the one that we're currently in left field. Like it came all the way from there. John Hunter Nemechek, in a shocking move, is going to be leaving Front Row Motorsports' number 38 after having an incredible rookie campaign. I don't know what the heck to say about this because I didn't see it coming whatsoever. We thought silly season was basically done and dusted. We thought our job for the year was done, but just wait a minute. 1 week after the season's done, John Hunter Nemechek throws a spanner in the works, and man, I don't know what to think about this because there's not many places he can go.
There's not many rumors about where he's going either.
I would imagine he has something lined up to say that he's done. Yeah.
The way
it just makes sense that way.
Message came out after the announcement from Front Row, and everybody made it seem like it was a Nemechek decision, and that he already had something that they'll be announcing in the next couple weeks. Who knows the timeline, because who knows what it is. Nobody saw this coming, and I'm talking nobody, including the insiders, because everything that had been talked about in terms of silly season in the past week and a half, basically forever in silly season, has said, although it's not confirmed, we expect Priest to be back in the 37, McDowell to be back in the 38, and Nemechek
34
in the 34. Or did I have that backwards? Sorry.
Backwards, yeah.
Apologies. But this came out of, as you said, beside left field. Like, everything's
That's coming from the parking lot, man. It's so far away. Like, I don't know what to say about this. It makes no sense.
Every seat is filled. Every seat that is an upgrade over Front Row is filled. And when it's a driver making the decision to leave a team, by the sounds of things at least, the way that everything's been said seems that way. Mm-hmm. It's for an upgrade. So there's got to be something in the
we're missing here.
There's a piece missing here, because I can't see Nemechek leaving Front Row to go to Aspire, for example, and play the long game. That doesn't seem to make sense. He's got the Chip Ganassi ties. Why would he go and take a long-term gamble on Spire when Chip Ganassi has a guy like Kurt Busch here who will be retiring in probably the next couple of seasons? Maybe next year's his final year. Who knows? And if you look at the driver market, if you're going based off of what Chip Ganassi Racing did this year, while they went with a guy in Ross Chastain that had previously been in their Xfinity program, well, John Hunter Nemechek fills that role pretty well. So maybe that would be the option, but who knows what's happening here. I feel like because this move is such a left field move, it's not just going to be a simple, he goes to an open seat that we know is open right now. At least it seems like that, because all the open seats right now are downgrades for at least the 2021 season. So unless Nemechek knows something we don't, or there's something coming down the road that we don't expect as well, this is definitely a strange one. What are your thoughts on this one? Because I don't really know where I'm at.
No, I don't either. It makes you think, does he think that the Xfinity Series will be better for him next year and try and line himself up to position himself for an Xfinity Series ride?
What's open in Xfinity?
It's just whether or not maybe Ganassi brings back an Xfinity car or something like that.
Now we get into some
there's a lot of different things.
Here we go.
So obviously John Hunter Nemechek has won in the 42 car for Chip Ganassi. I believe it was at Kansas in 2018, and he won that in the Xfinity Series. So Chip Ganassi likes winners. It's crazy to think that he has Ross Chastain in his car for next season after not winning a race this season.
That's a low blow.
Sorry, man, but that's
a low blow.
In our silly season prediction, I had John Hunter Nemechek taking that spot in the 42 car, and I had him leaving Front Row Motorsports. Obviously, I got that part right, but I did not see this part coming. But I'll take that I got that right. But besides that, I mean, you could toss a dart on a dartboard on a map of the teams that are available, and whatever one it sticks to, I mean, that's a possibility. I don't know what the heck he's doing. There's not too many options for him, man. Like, we've exhausted this for the past 4 months at least, where we've looked at every ride, and it seemed like we were down to it where Ryan Preece is going to stay in the 37 and Corey LaJoie is going over to Spire's one spot. There's still that second Spire car that we don't know about for next season if they do end up fielding that car. But who do you replace maybe at Front Row Motorsports? Do they just go down to one full-time car, Michael McDowell? Like, that's going to be quite the drastic turn of events there for Front Row to go from 3 cars, then down to 2 here, and then down to 1 potentially next season, if I'm not mistaken, with just McDowell, right? I'm not forgetting anybody, am I?
No, that's what they got right now, but I don't see them going down to 1.
It would be quite the drastic change of events in 2 seasons to go from 3 to 1, and they had probably their best season on record, with McDowell's results this year being heads and shoulders above of what his career averages have been. So I don't know what John Hunter Nemechek is thinking here. He's always been someone, it's been a curious prospect in my opinion, because he's gone from the trucks and the 8 truck and then has done that part-time. He never really went full-time in anything, and he's worked his way all the way up to the Cup Series. So it's one that I'm fascinated by as a fan to watch him as a driver, just his rise to the ranks and how he's gone about it. And I mean, this is just one I did not see coming whatsoever. It caught all the insiders off guard, like you said. So this is something that will definitely kind of transpire over the next coming days and weeks, I imagine, where we find out something concrete. But right now, it's just basically a puddle of nothing is probably what I've got as a kind of as an example. I don't know. I don't know what to ask you here, because like, obviously you know nothing more than I do, and I don't know nothing more than you do. Like, there's no real where to go with this. Like, John Hunter Nemechek, could you give us a little bit of something at least? Like, rumors, Sternsy, where's the rumors, man? You didn't have this one at all on your Twitter feed. I need something here to go off of.
Like, I was literally reading like a silly season kind of like recap / what's left from Bob Pockrass. I think yesterday. It might have even been this morning. I honestly don't know.
All the days blend together. I don't blame you.
Tell me about it. But he said in that article. Yeah, it was this morning. In that article, he said,
long day.
Yeah, I know, geez. That they expected to re-sign John Hunter Nemechek. And literally that day, later today, he announces that he's leaving. And Bob Pockrass is a guy who knows what's up going on. So I think that this is one that is catching a lot of people off guard, but I feel like there's a subsequent move that's going to catch a lot of people off guard. And there's a couple conspiracy theory type things that I got going on in my brain that might be the thing. You mentioned it a little bit earlier, the Chip Ganassi maybe bringing back the Xfinity program. I think that of the potential weird scenarios or unlikely ones, this might be the likeliest, because if you look around, Chip Ganassi shut down the Xfinity program for one reason, and that was the primary sponsor like a month and a half, 2 months before the season started, maybe even less. I can't exactly remember.
It was very
completely dropped out because they were fraudulent. So that was just not enough time to go out and try to find a different sponsor and run the car. So that made sense there, but it wasn't necessarily just an outright money thing because the sponsor for the entire season dropped out. So that would maybe lend you to believe that down the road, maybe that's something that they could bring back. And you look at a recent announcement, I believe it was today that it was announced as well, that Chip Ganassi is going back to IMSA and running the Daytona prototype full season with Cadillac there. So returning to IMSA there, maybe you return to the Xfinity program, and Nemechek would be the guy there. And if you're Nemechek, would you rather run in the 20s for Front Row Motorsports most of the time, or go out and try to win a championship in the Xfinity Series with Chip Ganassi Racing and set yourself up for the one car in a couple seasons, 3 seasons? Maybe that's what's happening. a much longer.
I would like that move.
Shot.
I would.
Yeah,
I would really like that move.
Something like a surprise retirement or something, and that's something that I really don't think is happening. But if you look at the field, the one guy that could potentially surprise retire is Ryan Newman, and obviously we saw John Hunter Nemechek kind of get the opportunity for a couple of reasons. One, Matt Tifft had his medical issues come back up, which was very, very unfortunate, but he had to step to the side suddenly. But then also David Reagan surprisingly retired. So when they went down to the 2 cars, Reagan was no longer there, so that opened up for Nemechek to take that spot.
I miss Reagan.
Maybe something opens up for him again in a surprise retirement if Newman decides to step away, but that seems very unlikely to me as well.
I hope he doesn't.
I just don't see him doing that after coming back last season and it being the last season of this generation. If he's going to retire in like these next couple of seasons, I would expect him to do it after this upcoming one so he doesn't have to adjust to the new car. That would seem something that could potentially happen. I don't see a surprise retirement coming from him. And Roush did pull the fast one as well with the Busch or Stenhouse move, so they do have a bit of a history here with surprising moves. But yeah, I just don't know what's going to happen here, quite frankly, because even both of those would be, again, farther from left field moves that we don't expect, especially the Newman one. So maybe Ganassi's bringing back the Xfinity program, but even then, who knows? So I feel like the Nemechek family might have something hidden up their sleeve, and we got a fun announcement coming soon. Because if it's just like a Spire announcement, I'll be left scratching my head after that one.
Yeah, that's a good point. If he goes to Spire, I don't know what he sees. I mean, there's definitely
it would have to be a long-term play.
I mean, it's difficult to say because I haven't seen them in a full-time basis, but potential quote unquote, I guess, would be probably an accurate way to describe it. We don't know what the future holds for that team, but if he does go to someone like Spire, I mean, you got to be thinking he's there for a couple of seasons at least. And I mean, I would probably.
If he's going to Spire, he's going there with long-term ambitions. He's believing what they're putting down, basically, that they're going to try and become a competitive team going into the future with the new car. And I just don't know. Like we talked about it last week with Corey LaJoie expected to go to Spire. That's one that makes sense for the long-term play because he wasn't going to get a quote-unquote upgrade from Go Fast Racing for next season. So go with basically status quo and play the long-term game. For John Hunter Nemechek, Front Row Motorsports is trending upwards. The decision to go back down to 2 cars worked. They were much, much more competitive. They had a car in the top 25, which is, if you told me that after last season, I would have laughed at you because they were basically 28, 29, 30th in points. Yeah, an upward trajectory. He seemed to be settling in well there, although the second half of the season was a bit worse. But then again, you would maybe expect that for a rookie, just kind of coming to grips with things. We expected him to improve next year, maybe challenge for top 25 in points, similarly with McDowell. And instead, he's leaving the team, leaves an open space all of a sudden in the Ford camp. Maybe somebody like Casgrala steps into that role, but again, we didn't really expect anybody to be available at Front Row Motorsports, so we haven't heard many rumors there. So who the hell knows what's going on? For all the curveballs that we've got for silly season, this might be the strangest one.
Yeah, this is a swing and a miss, man. If you threw this curveball at me, I'm striking out big time. Wow. I mean, I don't really have anything else to add on this because it's all speculation from here on. I mean, I don't want to put a name or anything into this car because I don't really know who's available and who's not anymore because it's very slim pickings for anybody. And I mean, the only move that for me that would make sense is him going back down to the Xfinity Series and trying to win races on a consistent basis and try to upgrade his current situation kind of thing, because he's probably not going to get anywhere with running 25th on a consistent basis with Front Row next season. So if he's going to do that, I respect the decision going back down. It's a rare move where we see that where they voluntarily, it seems, go back down to an Xfinity Series ride. Not saying that's going to happen or anything, but if it were to happen, and it seems like Nemechek is taking the kind of the front foot on this kind of contract negotiations and leaving and feeling like this is a better situation for him, then I respect that decision entirely. But until we know something concrete, I'm not going to put anything on this. So we'll see what happens over the next,
I am fascinated to see how this one plays out, because I think we both agree we both like Nemechek as a prospect going forward. I think we both believe that he's a really solid driver and somebody that, and if given the time to develop and given good equipment, can be a competitive guy in the Cup Series in the future. So fascinated, to say the least, where this ends up, because this is one that I was not expecting. Hey, I'll give you props. You called Nemechek moving on. Who knows? Maybe he does end up in the 42 just in the wrong series. Who knows?
I'm taking that all day long.
Hey,
I don't care.
I'll give you at least a half point.
Give me a half a mark.
Yeah.
Bonus mark. I don't care.
Got the right team, got the right number, just the wrong series.
Yeah, I'll take it. If it were to happen,
that would be a wild one, man.
Yeah, at least I would have got one thing right for silly season. I'll say that to an extent. But besides this right now, I'm pretty I'm on the losing side of things. But for right now, I think that does it for John Hunter and Nemechek. There's not really much else we can discuss on this topic. It's just madness that we're even discussing this in the first place, because
we've busted out all of our speculation, conspiracy theories, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, because I don't want to. I mean, does Chip Ganassi think about adding a third Cup Series car? I don't know.
But then when are you getting charters? Like, who knows?
No idea, man. I've got no idea.
We have to talk about charters again.
I am not talking about charters again right now. I've had enough. That's probably more stressful than all the schoolwork that I've got to do right now. That's that stupid charter system that I have to try and understand and grasp. But for right now, we'll leave it with John Hunter Nemechek. So we'll see what happens with that storyline over the next days or weeks. That is definitely the main one I'm watching on the NASCAR side of things as the off season rolls along. It's been a week since the Cup Series has been done, and look at this. We've already got some news that came out of left field. So that's all I've got for news and notes section for today's episode. Pretty dry in terms of the amount of content, but the content that is there, oh boy, that was juicy. It was juicy and spicy. But we'll move on to Formula One here, Kyle, as they had the Turkish Grand Prix this past weekend. We had the opportunity to kind of discuss it quickly on the Friday due to the technical difficulties that we've talked about at length on this show over the past week. But they had the two opening practice sessions, and it was basically like they were in Alaska on ice. So I don't know what to say about this racetrack, but they recently repaved it about less than 2 weeks before they ended up coming here to try and get the track ready. And they kind of messed it up on the repave in terms of making it ice. It seems like it was just a sheet of ice right over top of the track. Because it didn't have time to cure.
Finished like what? I think on the broadcast they said a couple weeks ago by the time the race started. So by race day, like we're looking at 13, 14 days since it had finally been completed and left on its own. You go back to this track and hell, even a month's time, it's going to be way different. You go back there 2-3 months, it's going to be just a normal racetrack. But just given the timeline of the project and how kind of condensed everything was, with all of a sudden F1 suddenly going there and having like a 3-month timeline and needing to get all this done, just created for hectic conditions. And oh boy, am I glad it was, because my goodness, was this weekend entertaining.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably the most challenging race I've ever seen in terms of the drivers saying it back to us as the fans, because usually they kind of play it off, but they're like, holy crap, that was difficult.
Even Raikkonen was like, yeah, this is unique.
Yeah, unique is the nice way of putting it. That's always a word that people are like, well, it's unique. It's not good or bad. I don't want to say how bad it is, but it's unique to say the least. And I mean, we had a qualifying session that was almost equally as entertaining as the race, and that's saying something, because it was insane. And as Canadians, we were pretty happy on this one. I gotta say, when I woke up on Saturday morning, I thought I had followed the wrong account, because there was no way in heck I could have seen this outcome whatsoever. But we'll talk about how it all unfolded in just a little bit. But we'll start off with Q1 as Verstappen would spin coming to the line for his opening lap. Over halfway through the session as well, it would be red flag for basically impossible driving conditions on the track. It was to add to the insane practices that were the day before, add rain to that, and you've got chaos on this track. I don't know how the drivers were even able to make a lap, because it's rain in itself is difficult enough with these cars and how powerful they are, and just getting them going is a challenge. But on this track and on an unknown track, to say the least, as well. They had never been here for a lot of these guys. Don't forget that variable in this as well.
Three guys in the field that had been here that were in the field the last time that Formula One raced at Istanbul.
Vettel, Hamilton, and Raikkonen, I guess, right? That would make the most sense.
I don't think Perez, because I believe that would have been the season that Raikkonen was out.
Grosjean wasn't in there then?
It would be close. I know those three for sure, because there was a stat after the race that the three guys that were in the last race at Istanbul finished on the podium, which is pretty jokes, but I'll double check here while we go along with things.
All right. So move on with the rest of Q1 here, as once the red flag was lifted for the torrential downpour that was on the track and basically puddles all over the place, we had another red flag, as it was a mad dash, though, before that for drivers to get in a solid lap time, Verstappen included. And Romain Grosjean would bring out the second red flag of Q1 after getting beached in the first sector. And that would left 3.5 minutes in Q1 to try and get everybody getting in a competitive lap time. So once you leave the pits, it takes about 2.5 minutes to get back around to the track in a way, because it was difficult to get any temperature in these tires. They just basically heated them up as much as they could in the garage stall, and they sent them on their way. As we move on to the end of Q1 here, I mean, Verstappen needed to get a good lap here at the end of the session, and oh boy, did he ever, as he wins Q1 by over 2 seconds over his teammate Alex Albon. Pretty damn good, I'd say so. But on the negative side of things, we've got Kevin Magnussen, Danny Kvyat. George Russell surprised me a little bit in how much he struggled. I know it was a struggle for all the drivers, but he usually excels in the wet conditions and a slippery track. So a little bit disappointing, I'd say, there from the Williams driver, finishing 18th there before all the penalties shook out. We'll talk about that, how that all happened. Grosjean in 19th there, and then Latifi misses out on Q2. Latifi was 13 plus seconds off of making it to Q2. And that number blew my mind when I saw that. Like, I know he spun on his last lap there in Q1, but 13 seconds slower on a track, like, that's nuts. I would have never imagined that you could get that slow compared to your competition. And I know the Williams isn't the greatest car out there, but to say the least, that was disappointing there from Latifi for his qualifying effort for a Canadian on one side of the grid, and we've also got another Canadian on the other side of the grid on how it all ended up. So we'll move on to Q2 here. Nothing too dramatic in this session, luckily. Kind of went on smoothly, as the two McLarens and the two Ferraris, along with Pierre Gasly, miss out on Q3 there. The Ferraris looked very good in the two practices. It was difficult to judge, though, just based off of how challenging it was for the drivers in these conditions. So a little bit disappointing there, I'd say, for the Ferraris and the McLarens as well. But they would both recover on the Sunday and regain that lost track position from qualifying. So now we move on to Q3 here, Kyle. Unbelievable scenes here in the final session of qualifying. I don't even know where to really start with this, because there's so many different ways we could go about this. Do you want to start with how it ended, or do you want to go sequential?
Let's try to go chronological, but again, it's tough.
All right, so it was a mad scramble here in Q3, to say the least, to try and figure out which tires to go on, whether that was the full wets or the intermediates, because the track was starting to dry out after the rain that started the session. So a drier line, quote unquote, was starting to form. So was the inters salvageable, and would it be fast enough for some of these guys in Q3? Verstappen goes on the full wets. Sergio Perez goes on the intermediates, along with I don't think anybody else was on the intermediates. Everybody else was on the full wet. So Racing Point took a bit of a bold strategy call there to put him out on the inters, and it did end up working. Verstappen seemed like he had pole position locked up to that point, because he had led every session in practice and in the qualifyings up until that point. But Perez goes top of the charts there after his first lap on the intermediate tires. And Verstappen, it was a mad scramble to try and put him on the intermediates then, because they realized that the full wets were just not going to get it done. But they had a very difficult time to get temperature into the intermediates, and that was Verstappen. And it was proven throughout the remainder of Q3. Lance Stroll also would come down into the pit lane to put on intermediates to match his teammate there. and he would go quickest overall over his teammate in Sergio Perez. And we still had Max Verstappen still left to go at that point in time, but Lance Stroll was on provisional pole with the time expired on the clock. So it was all down to Max Verstappen's bid for his first pole of 2020, and would have to wait as Lance Stroll, the Canadian, wins pole for the Turkish Grand Prix. Max Verstappen falls 2/10 shy of getting the pole position in second place. Sergio Perez would fall back down to third. But luckily for Lance Stroll, he would not get penalized after the qualifying. He was under investigation for not slowing down under yellow flags after his teammate in Perez spun on his final run as well. So there was definitely time in there for Perez to maybe get the pole as well. But Lance Stroll, our boy, the Canadian, gets pole position for the first time in his F1 career. What more can you say about this guy, Kyle? I mean, he's shown in the past that he excels in these kind of tricky conditions, finishing second in qualifying at Monza to Lewis Hamilton, which was an incredible achievement in the Williams car back then. And to say the least, this was an incredible drive from the young Canadian.
Yeah, when people talk about Lance Stroll, a lot is tied to his father's money. And yes, that's warranted because that's why he got into Formula One so early. But I think with results like this one and some of the results that we've seen this season in flashes show that he is legitimately deserving of a spot in Formula One based off of his talent. I don't think that you can really look at things like him winning pole in those conditions and say that, no, he's not deserving of a spot in Formula One. Where the issues may become is the consistency when it's just in regular conditions. Does he have the same, that kind of thing? But in terms of raw talent, it's there. And I think people forget just how young he is as well, because with that pole, he's one of the top 5 youngest pole sitters in F1 history, which is remarkable to say. So there you
22 years and 17 days. I had that stat lined up.
That's incredible, right? And yeah, he's been in Formula One for a few years, but he's still super young. He's still learning the craft. He's still developing as a driver. So when you look at results like this, and you see him staying in that seat over Sergio Perez, yeah, Sergio Perez is the better driver right now. But in the future, who knows what Lance Stroll can become? Because at 22 years old, in those conditions, he was able to go out and beat the rest of the field, which is something remarkable. And he did it beating Max Verstappen, who is, by a lot of accounts, the best in those conditions in the sport, in the better car. And he went out and beat him by almost 3/10, which is a remarkable achievement as well. So, yeah, I also wasn't watching qualifying live, but when I woke up and saw that, I was like, well, I'll be damned, because Lance Stroll, I think, shut up a lot of people with that result.
Yeah, and I was stunned that he would even get remotely close to this. I thought it was Verstappen's pole going into the qualifying when I went to bed on the Friday night. But when I woke up Saturday morning, I was in for a rude awakening, but a pleasant surprise, I'll say that, because this was great.
And kind of lost in it a little bit with the excitement of Stroll is kind of the disappointment for Verstappen as well. Leading FP1, leading FP2, leading FP3, leading Q1, Q2, and just so close.
He did everything right up to that point, and
just a heartbreaker.
That picture will stand in my mind for a while here, where he's just by himself with one of his team members just behind a corner, just distraught, kind of, that he lost pole. He thought it was his to lose, and it was. And Lance Stroll just went out there and just took it. I mean, what more can you say about the young Canadian? But I've got some stats here, because F1 does. I know you're a big stats guy, and I'm becoming more of a big stats guy as well. Here is what F1 has on their website. They have this great thing called a statistics, kind of breakdown for qualifying in the race. So it's very helpful to try and track down this stuff and not have to go on Twitter and look through everything. So credit to the F1 website for all these stats. But Lance Stroll is the first Canadian to win pole since Jacques Villeneuve in his Williams in the 1997 European Grand Prix. So it has been quite some time since we've seen a Canadian leading the field to the grid.
Session in its own right was crazy, because you had 3 people setting basically the exact same time. The scoring time, I believe it went to 2 decimal places. I'm not sure if it went to the 3rd.
Not sure.
But there was 3 people who had the exact same time to at least the second decimal, maybe even the third. I can't remember exactly. And when they had to go to the extra stuff, it was Jacques Villeneuve that ended up getting it, which is maybe fitting for Canadians to kind of go out and get the poles in kind of crazy circumstances. Maybe we can do it under just like less stressful situations in the future. But kind of funny how that played out, how 2 crazy qualifying sessions are the 2 most recent Canadians on pole.
Yeah, that's a great point. He's also the 5th youngest pole sitter of all time, like we said there as well, behind some great names as well. And it is also Racing Point's first pole position. Can you name the year? I'll try and quiz you here.
Racing Point.
So Force India back then.
Force India. Was it that Spa race? I don't remember what year it was. I'm gonna say 2010.
Oh, you're 1 year off. 2009, yeah, when Giancarlo Fisichella got pole at the Belgian Grand Prix. That's pretty good. I'll give you credit on that. Just 1 year off, but I'm surprised you got that close. But 2009 was the last time Racing Point, or Force India back then, formerly known, got pole position. It is also the first time since 2014 at the Austrian Grand Prix, where Felipe Massa took pole position that day, that other than a Mercedes, Ferrari, or Red Bull has won pole position. So since 2014, we've had three teams win pole, and this was the first time since 7 years since the last time we've had somebody different leading the field to the lights out. Also, Sergio Perez in third is the best place for a Mexican driver since Pedro Rodriguez's front row start in the 1971 Dutch GP. So it's been a long time for some of these guys to get these stats. And I mean, I'm so happy that they gave me these statistics because it's great. But
yeah, it's great context just to how remarkable of an achievement.
This was a long page.
Perez. Yeah,
this was a long one, and we'll move on to the Mercedes side of things on the heartbreaking, because even though Mercedes definitely continues their streak alive for the manufacturer kind of winning the pole position, they lose their perfect record this past weekend of getting pole position in every single race. So they fall, I guess, 4 races shy of that incredible feat that was basically within reach, and except for these incredible times, incredible circumstances that we've heard many times.
Watch them go out and get the other 3. And the only one they miss is this one. That would definitely leave a better taste for a season.
And they weren't even
it's been
close. They weren't even close in the qualifying and practices.
What was it, 5 seconds, the final tally for Hamilton?
Yeah, and speaking of Hamilton, his 6th place result is his worst qualifying since the German Grand Prix in 2018, where he started 14th and he won that race. And then the last time he started 6th in 2014 at the British Grand Prix, he won that as well. So we'll talk about how Lewis Hamilton in a bit here. But the stats were definitely aligning for Lewis Hamilton, even though he was starting 6th place. Like I said earlier, though, Stroll was under investigation, but no further action would be warranted on that side of things. So that's all the stats I've really found for the kind of top runners there. So Mercedes streak ends for most pole positions, but they keep that manufacturer kind of thing going, with obviously Racing Point being powered by a Mercedes engine. But Lance Stroll, with all those record-breaking or not record-breaking, but adding to the new timeline of the Canadian stats is probably a better way of putting it.
First non-Villeneuve Canadian to sit on pole in Formula One. Obviously Gilles, obviously Jacques, and now Lance Stroll adds his name to that list.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it, man. It still blows my mind. The Pink Panther car gets pole position, and it was quite the split up there at the front, because it was the same 5 teams in the top 10. They had all their teammates made it there, but it's definitely not the 5 teams I would maybe expect for the top 10. So we'll take a look at what the starting grid looked like after all the penalties going into the race here quickly. So we had Lance Stroll on pole, Max Verstappen 2nd, Sergio Perez 3rd, Alex Albon in 4th. So the Pink Panthers and the Red Bull up in the top 4.
From Albon as well.
Yeah, very impressive. I would say for about 80% of the race, Albon did a masterful job in these conditions, but we'll talk about how it all ended up there for Albon in a bit. Daniel Ricciardo in 5th, Hamilton in 6th, Ocon 7th, Raikkonen 8th, Bottas in 9th in a weekend that he needs to outscore Hamilton by 8 points to extend the championship battle to Bahrain in, I think it is 2 weeks' time, I guess. I think they have a week off now upcoming.
Sounds right.
And then Giovinazzi rounds out the top 10. So a great run there for the Italian driver. Vettel, Leclerc in 11th and 12th there for the two Ferraris after the McLarens both suffered penalties. Magnussen there in 13th place, followed by the McLaren duo of Norris and Sainz. Kvyat, Grosjean, Latifi. Gasly had a whole bunch of parc fermé problems that I don't really want to get into, but he had a whole bunch of different things. And Russell round up the grid for the Turkish Grand Prix. So that was qualifying, Kyle. What were your thoughts after watching the highlights and the session itself? I mean, you can't ask for much more from a qualifying session, can you?
No, you can't. It was start to finish just absolute bonkers. Spins, yellow flag seemingly every 15 seconds.
Yeah, I couldn't put all the cautions in there. I'm not even going to try and bother with that.
It was remarkable, and that's what you want out of a tricky conditions qualifying session. You want to see driver talent come through, not necessarily the car. And yes, the car will impact things, whether the car is able to get up to temp fast enough. Obviously setup and grip levels in those conditions as well. But the most important thing is the driver at the end of the day. And we saw Racing Point come out, and they had good setup. They were able to get temp into the tires quickly, and so they were able to utilize the inters, and that worked to their strategy, and not necessarily everybody else was able to do so. Just look at what Mercedes did. But driver talent came through, and it was awesome to see. And it was kind of funny seeing after qualifying and looking on Twitter, some people go, "Oh, look at Hamilton. He's just a fast car and poor conditions, blah, blah, blah." And I was like, "Oh, just you wait. And sure enough. But no, it was great to see in that regard. And see some different teams up inside the top 10.
Yeah,
look at
that was great.
Alfa Romeo getting both cars in the top 10.
Incredible.
Kimi Raikkonen out qualifying a Mercedes, for crying out loud. Like, if you told me at any point in the season that Kimi Raikkonen would out qualify his fellow Finn Valtteri Bottas, I would have laughed at you. And sure enough, he went out and did it, showing that the Raikkonen and the experience came to play. And just cool seeing Alfa Romeos in the top 10, because it's not something we get to see every day.
No, I love that this was just a mixed bag of results here for the qualifying. It was, I would have loved to have seen Ferrari get that next step in that kind of qualifying session there, because their race pace was spectacular. But the qualifying session left,
just couldn't get the temp.
Nothing really to be desired, in my opinion. I mean, I got everything I needed from that qualifying session, and the race just went exponentially more outside of the kind of standards I set. And they were already very high going into this weekend based off of the practice session. So, I mean, the qualifying was nuts, and the race equaled that, if not exceeded that, and that's saying something. So, congratulations to Lance Stroll. I wish we would have done it kind of on the Saturday. Just kind of done it to congratulate him on the qualifying, because the race didn't end up going his way. But congratulations to Lance Stroll on getting that first career pole position and making us Canadians very, very proud. And I mean, I'm expecting big things from Lance Stroll. He's not confirmed yet for Aston Martin's seat next year, but in all likelihood, we'll see him back there. And it's going to be great to see him go head-to-head with Sebastian Vettel over there next year. Yeah, very much so. So that's the qualifying session for the Turkish Grand Prix. You'd feel like that's kind of how long we do for a race recap on most occasions, but that was just a qualifying session. So let's get into the weirdly timed race for myself, because I've been staying up till about 1:30 to finish some projects for school. And I didn't realize that the start time was 2:00, and I'm like, oh, I can't go to bed. Like, I'm 30 minutes from the start. I'm like, I can't do it. Like, there is definitely a lot of possibilities of what was happening. A Canadian on pole, Lewis Hamilton potentially getting his 7th championship, tying the all-time record. And I mean, there's too many storylines for me to go to sleep. So even if I tried to go to sleep, I bet you I couldn't have. So we stayed up, both of us. Did you stay? I'm curious. Did you stay up like that entire time, or did you take a power nap and then wake up?
Power nap, yeah.
Power nap, okay.
Stayed up till like the usual time, like 1 or 2, something along those lines, and then went to sleep for a little bit. Because if it was anything more than like 4 or 5 hours, then I was just like going to be in a coma and wasn't going to be able to get up. But the couple hours to 3 hours, I would be able to get back up for that, watch the race, and then just like count the day off. I didn't have much to do anyways, which was nice. So just kind of right off the early afternoon sleeping and recovering from the race. But man, am I glad I did, because that as soon as I saw the entire weekend and the highlights from free practice and seeing the highlights from qualifying as well, I knew I couldn't miss this race, because just the unknown factor going into this Grand Prix, it's not too often you get conditions like this. So you got to take advantage when you do, and had to watch this one live, and definitely paid off.
Yeah, it was nice to watch the pre-show live. I just kind of stayed up and watched everything, and it felt really nice. I mean, I kind of regret it now looking back at it in terms of how tired I am right now, if you can't tell already. But nonetheless, it was very entertaining at that moment in time coming into the race. And I mean, I didn't know going into after we recorded on Friday that it was going to rain the Saturday and the Sunday.
Yeah, I didn't know
realize that the forecast was going into that. So it definitely was a little bit of spiciness on the F1 grid, to say the least. And it started about 30 to 40 minutes before the lights went out as it started to rain. Once again, the track was dry but still slippery because it is basically ice out there on the surface, but it started to rain, so that brought into the intermediates and the full wets potentially on how you wanted to start the race. So that strategy kind of took up the pre-race portion of the Grand Prix. And then, I mean, I was expecting it, to be honest. Coming to the grid is always a simple task, it seems, coming from the garage stall, going to the grid slot, and this was anything but for a lot of guys, and that includes Antonio Giovinazzi, as he would crash on the way to the grid. And listening to the onboard camera, I mean, he wasn't even on the freaking throttle. Like, no. He was slippery as heck. And luckily for him, he would just have to replace the front wing, and he was able to keep his top 10 starting spots. But it looked scary there for a couple moments. He beached it. He couldn't get out, but nonetheless, he ended up getting back to the grid, and they replaced the front wing. So no harm done in the end of things, I guess, for Giovinazzi. But on George Russell's side of things, he broke his front wing as well. I'm having a tough time remembering it. I didn't make a note of it then. Did he break it coming into pit road, or did he break it on the outlap kind of thing?
I think it was exiting. It was kind of weird, the camera shot. I don't exactly know what part of – I think it was on the exit. But, yeah, and again, he was a guy that wasn't going very fast as well and just completely binned it. And then actually, I think that was on pit entry because so I think it was on entry because Williams was planning to pit lane start both drivers and then Russell crashed. So I think it was him coming to the pit lane for the pit road start and crashed. Yeah,
because when I saw the camera shot, like, it was him coming down pit road with a broken wing. So I didn't know if he did a full lap or not, or if he did it like really coming into the pits there to try and do
I think it was on
the pit lane start
entry, planning to do a pit lane start, and just the chaos there. So
yeah,
and nonetheless, hey, you know what? I think at the time I was like, Williams, just start him from pit lane, let everybody crash into turn one, and go out and take your points and have a nice day. And somehow they got through relatively clean. I still don't know how there wasn't like a 10-car pileup.
And there was no safety car in this race either. Like that
what?
Blew my mind. I was expecting, if I had to guess, it would have been over under 3.5 is what I would have guessed. Like,
I would have taken the over.
I would have taken probably 3 if I were to do it, but like I was expecting at least 2. Like, it seemed like it was a foregone conclusion. Going in on that first lap, you're like, you got to get a safety car or something. Somebody's just going to lose it. But
there was talk that it might be a safety car start.
Yeah, and they didn't actually have that. It was quite the pre-race kind of segment. Like, it was just, you could just tell like the chaos and how uncertain everybody was of like, what the heck's going to happen in this race? And I mean, myself included, I was really on the edge of my bed at the time. I was in bed, but at the edge of my bed.
Course. To North American F1 fans, that's where we watch races.
Yeah, they don't forget about they forget about us West Coasters out here. We're on the worst time zone of anybody. Like, right in the middle of the morning. But I digress. We'll get into the race now. As we said about the guys that had their troubles before the race even started, everybody would make it through the formation lap, luckily, but it was a very tentative formation lap. Stroll, you can see a little bit of an experience though as well. Pretty much rushing to the grid, I'd say, compared to his fellow competitors who really took their time. But the guys at the back had a bit more of an advantage because their tires would have more temp when the lights went out compared to the guys at the front. And that was crucial the entire weekend, was tire temperature, just getting the tires to fire up and getting going. And a guy that did not get his tires really heated up there was Max Verstappen. And he had a terrible start from second place on the grid. There's no other way to really describe it. When the lights went out, he did not go anywhere. They're probably going to walk faster than that car was going there at the initial start, but a lot of people were struggling. But luckily for Lance Stroll, he would end up getting off the line fairly well and taking the lead very comfortably going into turn one. That cannot be the same said for cannot be said for the Renault of Esteban Ocon, and he would get clipped by his teammate in Daniel Ricciardo. The Renault driver in Ocon would spin, and then Bottas had nowhere to go. He had to spin to kind of avoid him. As he picked the power up, he lost the rear end as well, but luckily neither of them made contact on that point. But later on in the lap, Bottas sent it into one of the hard braking zones and took out Ocon as well.
Oh my goodness.
Bottas
guy's getting bullied all opening lap, and he's a guy who we expected maybe to be a contender for some points in this race, just given kind of his acumen in the rain. We saw it earlier in the year. What was it, Spa? I think it was that we had some rain there, and he showed up big time. Just very unfortunate opening lap. Kind of took him out of contention to get some decent points, but at the end of the day, still ended up finishing 11th. So recovered very, very nicely. Got some revenge. Finished above Bottas, who kind of ruined.
That wasn't difficult to do after what Bottas experienced.
Yeah, that's fair. But I'll give you that one.
Ocon recovered to finish 11th, just one spot shy of the points, one lap down in this one. But Sebastian Vettel was the storyline very much early on, as he would go from 11th place after qualifying 12th, but with the penalties, he started 11th. He would go from 11th to 4th in the first sector alone. What a start by the German driver, who's had, to say the least, a terrible season for Ferrari. This was his big bright spot of the season. If he can take anything away, he'll look back fondly on this one after what it all meant for the sport and for his season. Kind of, hopefully it's a turnaround. He can finish the season on a positive note from here. But these circumstances really showed who the best drivers are on the grid in a lot of ways. And Sebastian Vettel had a really, really great start there, going up to 4th position. On lap 2, Hamilton misses the corner, allowing Verstappen, Vettel, and Albon to get past. So just a little bit of just uncertainty going on to the brakes at that point in time. The tires weren't heating up for the Mercedes. It just took them a long time for them to get temperature in their tires, and Hamilton on lap 2 kind of messes up there. But that would probably be his only mistake of the race, to be honest. It didn't take him long for him to get adjusted. Lance Stroll got out to a 10-plus second lead at one point. It was incredible. His pace.
Yeah, he was a pit stop up on Hamilton.
He was a pit stop up on Hamilton after, I guess it was 10 laps or something like that. It was fairly early on in that on the race. Yeah, it was. Lance Stroll was out there, and I was like, if he doesn't make a mistake, it's going to be very difficult for him to get this gap closed down. I know there's a lot of room for error in this race, let alone
That's put it lightly.
But Lance Stroll was looking very, very good early on in this race. And everyone had a tough time getting past Sebastian Vettel as well. Verstappen had spent countless laps behind the German driver, and then Hamilton had the exact same problem later on. Vettel was defending marvelously, especially when there was no DRS available, which that was later on deployed once the track became quote-unquote dry enough for them to feel like that was okay. But at that point in time, Vettel was doing a very great job at defending, and we got to see the 4-time world champion almost at his best, I'd say, on Sunday afternoon or morning for myself at an ungodly hour. But nonetheless, Leclerc would be the first one to go on the inters as well. The Williams guys started on the inters, but Leclerc was the first one on the full wets that everybody else had started on to pit for the intermediate tires, and that was about less than 10 laps in, I guess, around there. There was a lot of stuff that happened in that opening 10 laps at the same point in time. But Leclerc was the first one to kind of go on to the inters, and it really paid off as His speed was very, very quick, and everybody else kind of followed suit over the next 5 or 6 laps. And Verstappen was actually the one that went long on that strategy to stay on the full wets, and it actually paid off as he ended up jumping Vettel in the pit stops miraculously after Vettel had pitted 1 or 2 laps prior to him on the intermediate. So Verstappen did a great job there to maximize the fresh air on the nose of his Red Bull, and got it out ahead of Vettel into, I guess it was 4th place at that time, or 3rd. Who was in 3rd at that point? I guess Vettel got up to 3rd. Yeah, he got up to 3rd. Vettel was in 3rd place because
yes.
Yeah, because it was
second,
the racing points were in the top 2 spots. But Verstappen would get up to 3rd at that point in time, and Verstappen's struggles would not kind of stop behind cars as it would continue on to lap 17, where he would have a difficult task of getting past the Mexican and Sergio Perez, and it proved that the Dutchman was just a bit too over-aggressive on this occasion as he goes over the slippery curb. It was a very interesting kind of spin for Verstappen as he was very much in the slipstream of the racing point, but he had nowhere to go, spray everywhere, and then he just kind of went a little too wide on the exit of the corner. And with an incredible save, I might add, he just did a couple of 360s and kind of went on his way, but unfortunately that would kind of be the end of Max Verstappen's day of challenging for a victory. After it seemed like if he got past Perez, he could have been on site for his win because the racing points were starting to digress at that point with the firing off of the tires, and I think they probably put a lot of air pressure into them to try and get them to fire off quickly. I think that as the run went on, it really did start to dampen, or I guess dampen their performance would be a nice way of putting it. But yeah, Verstappen spins there, and he would pit for flat spotting those intermediate tires. But he kept it out of the barriers, luckily. Valtteri Bottas had about 20 spins in this race, if I can recall correctly. I wish there was a counter on it. Yeah, I mean, I've never seen Valtteri Bottas have much more of a poor performance than this. I don't even know if I've ever seen anybody have a poor as bad of a performance as this was from Bottas, really. And the competition that he has in the amount of equipment that he has and the level of competition that he has behind him here in Mercedes equipment, to see where he ended up and to see where his teammate ended up, I mean, there's a lot of question marks there already with Valtteri Bottas keeping his seat for this long, just based off of how dominant Lewis Hamilton has been, and he hasn't really had a challenge internally at Mercedes for a couple of seasons now. This race really drives that hammer home, because Bottas really, really struggled in this one, and it prevented any doubt of Hamilton clinching his 7th world title. I mean, even after the first lap, it was like, this race is basically
done and dusted.
So we'll talk about that and Hamilton in just a little bit. Albon was having a great run up to that point as well, but unfortunately he would spin from 3rd place after Verstappen's issue. He had worked his way up to 3rd, past the Mercedes of Hamilton and the Ferrari of Vettel, and worked his way up to 3rd, but then lost it in the opening sector there. And he would fall back behind Hamilton, who just kind of was slowly creeping up the pack one by one. Didn't make a foot wrong basically after that lap 2 kind of error that he had that I mentioned earlier. But while all this is happening, Lance Stroll is leading this race very, very fine. He's out in front, and as the run went on, it was starting to condense.
Perez was starting to cut into it a little bit. So you're like, okay, is Perez finding pace? Is Stroll maybe losing some pace? Is he just saving something? You didn't really know at that point, but what you did know is that at least both racing points with Verstappen spinning there had a pretty comfortable gap.
Yeah, that's a good point, because the racing points just seemed like so superior in the first 20 laps, I'd say. And then after that, it was starting to come back down that gap slowly but surely. Yeah. Everybody else was starting to catch up. And then by the end of I guess it was their second stint after their first pit stop, and the second stint. Yeah. Stroll's tires were really graining hard, and he was losing time at a massive rate to even his teammate in Perez, and then also to the field behind him. So this caused Lance Stroll to pit from the lead after his tires were wearing very aggressively, and his lead was disintegrating fast, like I said. And but unfortunately for him, unfortunately, that's. I didn't mean to even write it that way, but but unfortunately for Lance Stroll, the new inters would not prove to be any more of a game than his old ones, as they would basically grain immediately. And that was basically Lance Stroll's race over in terms of competing for a victory. It was very unfortunate there, Kyle, as Lance Stroll was in the position to win this race, done everything right up to that point. Didn't really put a foot wrong in the race. It was just kind of the car let him down at that point, and the tires let him down.
Yeah, and after earlier today, actually,
They released,
way early for us, they announced kind of something that they discovered on the car. I don't know if you want to talk about that now or later, but just unfortunate to kind of see something that kind of out of their control ended up ruining Stroll's day. And we don't even know if the strategy to come down and take the extra set of tires would have helped at the end of the day, because the issue just kind of murdered those tires as well, to put it bluntly. And when you look at what Perez was able to do, stay in second place, ended up losing a ton of time to Hamilton, obviously, by the end of the race, but still stay in second. Who knows what Stroll would have been able to do. You would expect, if he didn't have the damage there, that he would still be able to finish on the podium. What the gap to Hamilton would have been, I don't know. If the fight, who knows what would have happened there, to be honest. But yeah, after the race, during the usual post-race set down, they discovered a significant contributor to the graining issue, damage on the underside of the front wing. I believe they see here that it was one of the strakes on the underside of the front wing had come loose, launched itself in a way that the blockage caused a significant loss of front downforce. And so obviously, when you don't have as much downforce in F1, when downforce is the name of the game, it's going to result in a lot of tire wear. Just trying to keep pace. And you saw that in that final stint, where it wasn't just the tires, it was also the lack of downforce. And that Racing Point was just dropping like a rock. And you saw it when he was passed by the likes of the Ferraris, the McLaren. It was just, he was a sitting duck at that point. And it was really unfortunate to see, because
heartbreaking.
50% of that race essentially was exactly what he needed to do to go out and at least get a podium. And just one little piece of the front wing coming loose and getting launched in a very specific way went and snatched it from him. Thankfully, he was able to go out and get some points, so at least that streak ended for him. But man, for as great of the weekend that Stroll was having, a bit disappointing there to finish just ninth at the end of the day, when he was leading for so much of this race and looked like he could be on for another podium here.
Yeah, I was devastated for him. I felt so bad for the guy. You just hear the desperation in his voice, like, what the heck is going on? Like,
nothing you could do.
He didn't know what was going on. He doesn't know why the car just went to absolute garbage in a matter of laps. The tires were just
disintegrating on him. And when all weekend long you've been able to get tire temp in the tires, and you were one of the few cars that were able to do that, and now all of a sudden your tires are just dying on you. It's just got to be a helpless feeling, and just trying to hold on for as long as you could. And there's only so much you could do. Honestly, given what we know now, the tire grain and the loss of downforce, it's honestly impressive that he was able to hold on and still finish in the points.
Yeah, there's no way he was going to retire the car after all that. Like,
oh God, no.
They were gonna stick it out there, and luckily he still gets that points paying finish. So he breaks that streak of not getting points. I think it was like 4 or 5 consecutive.
Yeah, the last one was the podium.
Yeah, that was no. Yes, it was. Sorry, yes, it was. Then they had that disappointment there at
the
Mugello,
and
where he would have got points.
And
Yeah, all that stuff. But unfortunately, it's just been insult to injury up to this point for Lance Stroll. But at least he can hopefully take away the pole position as a bright spot from this weekend.
Oh, I'm sure he will.
Yeah. At that point in time, though, after Stroll's pit stop, there was a debate on the broadcast whether to pit for slicks or stay on the intermediate tires, because the dry line was beginning to form. I mean, with the way the track was, even on a kind of dryish surface, I wouldn't even put slicks on it then. Like, it was just, I would have never thought to put slicks on there at the end unless you're just going for a risk. But they really try to brighten
push the narrative.
They try to push that narrative. That's a good way to put it. So Lewis Hamilton would go to the lead for the first time on lap 37, getting past Sergio Perez after lap after lap after lap, just chasing him down. And at that point in time, DRS had been enabled, and he just flew by him on the back straightaway. One of the coolest camera shots, though, I will have ever seen in Formula One there over top there, and then they just kind of rush underneath them. That was really, really cool. But Hamilton takes the lead for the first time of the race on lap 37. Speaking of Lance Stroll there earlier, he was eager in a battle there with the Ferraris, just trying to hold on because the tires had already grained after a couple of laps since he had pitted there. And his competition was really charging down on him as the Ferraris would get past him after Lance Stroll drives it in too deep into the corner and just makes the best of a bad situation, I guess, at that point in time. He just fell back. He had no pace and was nowhere near the car that we saw earlier in the race that we already talked about there. So lots of different strategies were on throughout the race as well. Verstappen was on a different one. He had worked his way back up into the top three, but he needed to pit again just based off of how old his tires were. And the intermediates were basically becoming slick tires with how dry the track was, and they were driving in it, so they had to cool them down, go off the racing line on the straights, try and get some sort of cooler temperature into the tires. It's funny where the narrative was we got to get temperature in the tires. They had to cool them down on the straightaways by the end of the race. So just a great couple of storylines there throughout this event, and we're near the end of this one now as Lewis Hamilton has a commanding lead over everybody else, and unfortunately for Valtteri Bottas, this race would get no better as Lewis Hamilton would lap Valtteri Bottas with less than 10 laps to go to bring an end to, I mean, Bottas did, I wouldn't say everything that he could because Hamilton has just been so superior. I don't think anybody could really stop him this year, no matter who was in that second Mercedes car. But Bottas with a disappointing end to his championship bid that was basically secure already coming into this race. But Lewis Hamilton just drives the final nail into the coffin for this one as he laps his teammate there late on in the Turkish Grand Prix. And without further ado, congratulations to Lewis Hamilton on winning the 2020 Formula One World Championship and the Turkish Grand Prix as well. Wow. I mean, that final stint there where Hamilton nursed the tires for over 35 laps on intermediate tires, a one-stop strategy. He won this race by over 30 seconds over Sergio Perez. And to put that into perspective, Lance Stroll had a pit stop lead over Hamilton by the time the first pit stops occurred. So Hamilton effectively gained almost 50 seconds on his competition there at the end of this race. Like, I don't know how you do that.
Not just over the race, just in that final, two stints there?
I guess
for the people that
laps
went on two tire stops, the final two stints. But after the pit stop, he basically gained 50 seconds, which is insanity. 50 seconds over the entire race would be impressive. Doing that with 17 laps or whatever they pitted at, shaved off, come on. Just otherworldly, and shutting up the people that kind of tried to poke fun at Hamilton for just being in a fast car or whatever after qualifying, because the Mercedes was set up to conserve tires, not to heat them up super quick and burn them all out. And we saw that play out in this race where, at least for Hamilton, obviously Bottas is a very different story. Hamilton ran a solid race, had some issues early on with some grip. We saw him almost lose it going into that final chicane on that first lap. But after that, the Mercedes slowly built up temp in the tires. And funny enough, by the end of the race, when that set of inters were basically a set of slicks, it was basically perfect for them because the amount of temp in the tire had built up over the race being used. And the level of grip at the end of the race was basically that of a slick tire, and worked out well for Hamilton there. So what was kind of the downfall of the Mercedes in qualifying ended up helping Hamilton to the win, in addition to his superb driving. So just the fantastic kind of cherry on top, I guess you could say, of a championship season and a remarkable season for Lewis Hamilton.
Flawless. Just flawless. I mean,
basically flawless.
He is just incredible. I mean,
ignore the incident with Albon in the first race of the season. Flawless.
Yeah, Lewis Hamilton is the best driver I've ever seen drive a race car. I mean, I don't think there's any argument there. For my lifetime, maybe there's somebody that's better than him in the past, but for what I've seen and watching racing for almost 15 years, I guess it is now, he's the best one I've ever seen. And I can't believe the momentum that he keeps on building week after week after week, and the competition has no chance, basically.
None.
Like coming into this race on Sunday, I guess, morning, I didn't think Hamilton would probably win the race. I thought he would get a podium, but I thought it would just be too tough of a task to beat Max Verstappen's track position off the start. I thought this was Verstappen's kind of race to lose just because of how strong he was in these conditions. And I think Hamilton is the best in these conditions in wet. I don't think Verstappen is even as good as him, but those two are the best. Hamilton is just on another level right now. And you just see the experience and the drive that he has. Nobody can come close to him. 30 seconds over the pack in this kind of a race where it was chaotic throughout is remarkable. And the fact that he pulled away with 30 seconds with, I guess it was 20 laps to go. I mean, that's over the math. I guess it is 1.25 seconds a lap. Is that right? Like, is that close to that 1.2 seconds a lap? Like, that's remarkable pace. I know the Mercedes is the quickest car out there. Don't get me wrong, but the wet conditions kind of thing really equal things out, and they're meant to bring everybody a little bit closer.
I don't think you can even make the Mercedes argument in this race because of Bottas there. And even I don't think Bottas is without the spins, even without the spins, Bottas didn't have the pace as well.
No way.
It was a pace thing and it was a spins thing for Bottas. Without the spins, he finishes in the points. But what?
That's not saying much.
7th, 8th. I don't think on pace it would have been much higher than that, maybe even lower. Like, no. I think that's the kind of drive that was perfect for Hamilton to win this championship. It wasn't like some of the other championships where he's won without winning the race. I think winning and in this fashion just kind of added to it. And you even saw it when he got out of the car as well, and some of the emotion that he showed as well after winning the record tying 7th championship. I think the way he won this championship, I think added to kind of the emotion afterwards, because it was a race where I think a lot of people had kind of written him off for the race win. And honestly, myself included to a certain extent.
Same.
Yeah, I thought that he might get in the conversation, but he wasn't my favorite. I don't even know if he was in my top 2. So just what a drive from Lewis Hamilton. And yeah, it's kind of been a theme this year where we've talked quite a bit about appreciating the greatness this year. And I think that that's finally come around for Lewis Hamilton this year. And I'm so grateful that it has, because if a guy like this came and went without being appreciated in the moment, it would be a damn shame. And it feels like after securing this victory, after securing the 7th championship, that's coming or has arrived for Lewis Hamilton. And just kind of the storybook of it as well, the race where he really came onto the scene in GP2, as they were showing in the pre-race back in 2006, where he had the spin and came all the way back through the field to finish second, and in insane just conditions there in the short, I believe it was sprint race as well. And then you look at this one here and being able to clinch the 7th title at Istanbul as well. Just kind of funny how things kind of run its course like that. And yeah, Lewis Hamilton is just otherworldly. There's really no other way to say it.
Yeah, the storylines for Lewis Hamilton's career, there's not a better narrative, in my opinion, that I've ever seen, really. Like, how it's all worked out. I mean, I'm a little biased. Just how this season has played out for us as, people who love motorsports. Lewis Hamilton wins his first race in Canada, but he has this GP2 kind of race here in 2006 where it kind of really kicked off for him. Ties the record in Germany for the all-time wins record, breaks the record in Portugal. So both of our kind of nationalities behind the scenes here, I guess that kind of made us who we are, really got into this. And then Turkey for Lewis Hamilton himself, where this career kind of really kicked off in GP2. This is where it ends up getting his 7th title to tie the all-time record held by Michael Schumacher. And in all likelihood, he's going to break it here next year when he signs that contract extension. There's that drive. And I think he kind of put that narrative to rest that he's going to retire after this race weekend, because he said he still has something left in the tank and he still feels like he's driving at his best he's ever has. And I mean, there's no stopping this guy right now. As long as Mercedes puts out a competitive car that doesn't even have to be the best car out there, I think Lewis Hamilton could still win a championship based on his consistency and the speed that he has behind the wheel of a race car. It's truly incredible to watch. So just a couple of stats here as well for this.
Yes, here we go.
So Lewis Hamilton.
Do I have any guessing games for this one, or can I sit back?
Let me just see here.
Okay, well, let's go along and maybe we'll...
I don't have anything right now. It's not too many stats for this one, but Lewis Hamilton recorded his 73rd victory for Mercedes with this victory, and which is now a new record for all time in Formula One as well for the most wins for a driver for a single constructor. That's a great accomplishment there to add to the checklist. So back when he, I guess it was when he won, when he beat the all-time wins record, we did a statistical breakdown of everything Lewis Hamilton is breaking. We'll add these two things to the list here. So we had that one, and then he has now recorded points in 47 consecutive races. And now that is 80 of the last 81 Grand Prix. I'll give you this one. When was the last time Lewis Hamilton did not score points?
Oh, God. I have no clue on this one.
Come on. It's pretty obvious.
I don't know.
Think.
No, I'm blanking on this one.
Okay, when Lewis Hamilton blew his engine in Malaysia. That's when
How do I get Giancarlo Fisichella?
Yeah, how do you get that one and not get that one? The iconic photo of that one.
Yeah. I even remembered it was Fisichella as well, but I don't get it. Jeez.
Yeah. You know your history, but you don't know the recent history, I guess.
I guess so.
Just over the past couple of seasons. But that was an interesting one. And just quickly on a side note, on the broadcasting side of thing, that was probably the best tribute I've ever seen in motorsports or even sports history, with how they had the graphics playing over top of his visor. As someone who loves the graphics and everything like that of the production side of things, that was incredible. Like it brought tears to my eyes how emotional that was and how much thought they put into that. And that is incredibly difficult to do. I think F1 just continues to break the barriers in terms of graphics and how they just present the broadcast of a race. Like, it's just second to none, in my opinion. If North American sports implemented that in some ways, I think everybody would be thankful. But Formula One does a great thing there with Sky Sports and the entire F1 broadcasting team. They just nail it week in and week out for this motorsport. So just wanted to really give a shout out to whoever did that. If you're listening to this or this clip ever comes across you did a masterful job with trying to put that all together there. And on Hamilton himself as well, I was so happy to see the emotion for him, because he's obviously, he's not a soft-spoken guy. That's not the right way to put it, but he's a guy that keeps his emotions in check, I guess.
Reserved.
Yeah, reserved. He just kind of keeps it internally, I guess. He really soaks it all in, but this time he really let it loose, and it was externally with his emotions. And the fact that he sat in his car that long when he got back to pit road and just got to see Sebastian Vettel give him a high five. And
that was great.
They say you did it. I mean, the storyline, I remember it was who's going to get that 5th world championship, Sebastian Vettel or Lewis Hamilton. And look what we have got over the past couple of seasons where Hamilton's tying the all-time record. I mean, it's just incredible what this man is doing. And that was a really, really cool moment. So I'm happy to see that. I'm just like, I'm so full of, I guess, just reminiscing of all of this. I'm just trying to soak it all in from my perspective as well. Just trying to remember this as much as I can, because I don't think that we'll ever see anything really like this ever again. So at least not for a long, long time, where I'm not losing my memory or something like that down the road. But I think for right now, Lewis Hamilton, I'm just so grateful that I've been able to watch this. Like we've talked about on the show as well, this has just been an incredible year in terms of us trying to do with this show and thinking about everything that we've kind of watched over the years of our motorsports watching career, I guess, if you want to put it that way. This has been one year to remember for a lot of reasons, and Lewis Hamilton is definitely near the top, if not at the top of the list in terms of making these memories count. So really want to give a shout out to Lewis Hamilton in terms of that respect. So just quickly, Kyle, before we kind of wrap up the Formula One thing, that final lap was not done after Lewis Hamilton crossed the finish line. Sergio Perez was under fire from the two Ferraris and the McLaren of Carlos Sainz, who had quietly worked his way up in the mix as well. Very underrated drive there from Carlos Sainz, who actually started outside the top 10 back in, I think it was, 15th or something like that. Yeah, I mean, it was an incredible drive. Yeah, so Sergio Perez would get passed by Charles Leclerc, it seemed, but Leclerc would get into like the marbles and then going into the final big braking zone.
Locked up a little bit,
Locked up and went in there way too deep, allowing the Racing Point of Perez to repass him, and Sebastian Vettel passing his teammate. Leclerc passed him earlier. Vettel gets redemption, and Vettel closes out the last two corners to get his first podium of the season. That a boy, Seb. Sergio Perez comes home second. Charles Leclerc was kicking himself in the head after that one. You could see it as the race kind of after he crossed the finish line.
I'm kind of glad he did. I'm not going to lie.
I love Charles Leclerc, but to see Vettel on the podium there for that race, perfect. And Leclerc finishes fourth ahead of Sainz. He just held him off there in that final corner there. So that's the top five. Verstappen recovers to sixth, Albon seventh, Norris eighth, Stroll all the way back to ninth. Unfortunate there for him. Ricciardo in 10th, and then Bottas finished 14th there. So, wow, what a race it was. I mean, this is one I'm going to remember for a long, long time. Yeah. Even if Hamilton wasn't going for a championship in this race and clinched it, this is still a race that I'll remember forever. But this one, with that added bonus there of record tying with the championships, there's nobody like Lewis Hamilton in professional sports, in my opinion. He's just incredible. So what are your thoughts, I guess, takeaways from this one? I mean, there's so many different things with the podium itself, Perez and Vettel on there with Hamilton. Like, it was unfortunate, though, that they messed up the flags on the podium celebration. They had Perez and Vettel switched. That's just blows my mind how it was just so good up until that point. And I'm like, oh, no, they messed it up. But besides all that, there's a lot of good things to take away from this one.
Yeah, and well, I can confirm that the last time that we came to Turkey for Formula One in 2011, it was those three on the podium that were the only three.
That's awesome.
Which is great to see. And if you go back to that, Sebastian Vettel first, Lewis Hamilton fourth, and all the way down to 14th, Sergio Perez with Sauber. So if you would have told me at the time, or told anyone really, that it would be Vettel, Hamilton, and way down in 14th, Perez being the three guys 9 years later making the return to Turkey and getting on the podium, out of all the names on that list, I'm not sure too many people would have believed you. So great to see in that regard, and kind of fitting in that regard as well. Kind of cool, the storyline there. But yeah, I don't know if it's the number one race for me this season. I'll say number one race weekend. The entire weekend as a whole, I think, was the most entertaining. I'm still going to give Monza the number one just because of the finish and the crazy storybook for Pierre Gasly. I think that just takes the cake a little bit more, just because the end of the race was a lot more hectic than this one was. You kind of got to soak in the finish there. Although second place battle was good, but that wasn't necessarily the primary focus. So I'll still put Monza number one for me, but this is definitely the number two, and race weekend as a whole, just superb. I really hope that this cements Istanbul is that placeholder event for the fourth race of the season next year, please. Man, I just hope we get something good there. And Istanbul, I think, showed this weekend, even with the track condition being what it was, how great of a racetrack this is. And maybe
when it's dry if we go proper, back there, it's going to be a great racetrack.
Proper, like, come on. It's going to be fantastic.
It's a great track.
Hopefully we can go back there next season, and maybe proper conditions, maybe the crazy conditions again. I wouldn't complain either. But yeah, what a weekend this was for both history books, for the Canadian side of it, for Lewis Hamilton, for the entertainment side of it. Sorry. I don't think F1 could have asked for a better weekend.
This is probably going to be my number one weekend for this season for myself. Based off everything. That's I know Italy is with Monza is a very close second.
Race day alone, I'm going Monza. Race weekend, definitely this one.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I was disappointed by the race because it was very, very good, but I was expecting even more chaos than what it was. But the drivers did an excellent job. I mean, that just goes down to what the drivers are able to do, and who took advantage of the speed and the traction of where they could find it, and the teams that played the right strategy with A, car setup, and B, tire management. Yeah. Like they all did a great job. So. I mean, Mercedes just proves that they are class of the field once again, not only with Lewis Hamilton, but as a constructor in themselves. They're just too good that nobody can match them right now. Even on a race where it seemed like they were outmatched with the competition, where they just didn't quite have it this weekend, they end up with the top step on the podium. So that was really, really cool to see. And I mean, also, I think back to the Lewis Hamilton blowing tires at the British Grand Prix. I think that was a great one for this season as well. I'll always remember that as the Cars movie remake, basically, in real life. So that one's going to go probably in the top 3 as well. But we've had some great races this season, especially with this experimental calendar that they've had. And hopefully they can take one of these races that they've gone to this season that is not on this calendar for next year.
One more different layout. Obviously, we've been to Bahrain many times, but a different layout here coming up in a couple, 3 weeks time, is it?
I guess it is,
for the outer layout of the track. So that's going to be fun. But yeah, the last new addition, I guess you'd say, in terms of complete new venue for something that wasn't originally on the schedule, which is bittersweet to say the least, because it's been fun to go to some new places that, at least for us, we haven't been able to see on the schedule in some respects, such as Portimao, brand new to Formula One as a whole. Yeah. It's been fun in that regard. But man, what a way to kind of send it off with Istanbul.
Yeah, I couldn't said it better myself there. So that was a great Turkish Grand Prix, yes. 10 out of 10 weekend. Congratulations to Lewis Hamilton on your 7th world title. An incredible accomplishment, man. That was an incredible drive to cap off an incredible career that you've had thus far, and we're excited to see what you do next year over the next couple of races, and hopefully into next season as well, going for the record-breaking 8th championship. In all likelihood, that'll be yours next season that come this time as well. So what a great F1 season it's kind of been. It's not over yet. 3 races still left to go, but the championship is wrapped up after this one. So any final thoughts on the F1 side of things? And then you can take it into Sebring if you would like here, Kyle.
Yeah, just a fantastic weekend. So glad that it was this kind of entertainment after the NASCAR season ended. That was definitely good timing in that regard, because I can't imagine trying to jam this race alongside a NASCAR playoff race or anything like that. Oh my God. Thank God for that. But yeah, just fantastic weekend, and one, as you mentioned, that I don't think we'll be forgetting anytime soon.
Yeah, it was just an incredible weekend, and hopefully Bahrain can deliver to some respects. I love the track. It's always a great, entertaining race, in my opinion there. Usually the second or third race for the season. This time it's the third and second final race of the season. So a bit of a contrast there for Bahrain in that respect. So we'll look forward to that in a couple of weeks' time. We don't have Cush's 3s for this one, but I'm sure Lewis Hamilton will be at the top of the list for this one, and as well as Sebastian Vettel and Sergio Perez will probably make that list as well. But take it away, Kyle, with Sebring. That's all I've got really for Formula One.
Yeah, great Formula One race, and very spicy one in Sebring as well for the IMSA finale. Didn't get to check out as much of this race as I was maybe hoping for, but caught the end of the race with a late yellow that kind of made things interesting as well. But at the end of the day, it was the number 55 entry from Mazda pulling out the victory overall. Ryan Hunter-Reay helping out with that entry. Cool to see the amount of IndyCar drivers that actually got involved in this race. With obviously the IndyCar season being over, there was quite a few IndyCar names that were back in the field in this one. Ryan Hunter-Reay with the winning entry, the number 55 Mazda. But in addition to that, Simon Pagenaud finishing second with the number 6 Acura Team Penske. You look down the list here, just bunch of different names. Obviously, Sebastian Bourdais did a little bit of IndyCar in addition to IMSA, but he was in the field as well. You look down here, Scott Dixon was in the field as well. Alexander Rossi.
Wow.
So there's quite a few IndyCar names in the field for this one. But yeah, the kind of the climax of this race was the rivalry between Acura Team Penske and the Whelen Engineering Racing, but primarily driven by Pipo Derani, and the clash that they had in the middle of this race. Obviously, the big kind of incident this season between the two was at the 24-hour race at Road Atlanta, when the Petit Le Mans, when they got together at the end of that race, costing both the victory there. Kind of came to a little bit in the last race where there was an incident in practice between the two, and then coming to blows in this one as well. Not the number 7 entry that was going for the overall championship, but it was a Team Penske nonetheless, and it was between Juan Pablo Montoya and the number 6 and Pipo Derani driving the number 31. Late braking, beating and banging a little bit, almost looking like NASCAR on a road course for a little bit there. But then just a little too much, and Juan Pablo Montoya ended up getting into Pipo Derani, and they ended up spinning and basically cost Pipo Derani and the number 31 a chance at the title, because they ended up finishing 1 point behind the number 7 entry of the Acura Team Penske that ended up winning the overall championship with Elio Castroneves and Ricky Taylor there. And the number 6 was able to continue on after that incident and ended up finishing 2nd overall, 10 seconds back of the number 55 Mazda entry. So a chaotic ending to the IMSA season. Definitely a great way for Elio Castroneves and Ricky Taylor to go out winning the championship. Not an overly exciting race for them, but did what they had to do and finished overall top of the championship there. Just a crazy kind of turn of events there. And yeah, just a fantastic IMSA season. Didn't get to watch as much of it as I would have hoped for, but going into next season with Chip Ganassi adding that entry there, starting off the season with the Rolex 24 and some of the exciting names that'll be in that entry. I'm excited to watch a little bit more IMSA going into next season and pay attention to that championship a little bit more as it plays out.
Yeah, that's definitely a goal of mine for next year. Just kind of start the season off with the Rolex 24 and then kind of continue on as the season goes on. Yeah, me too. It's going to be after a couple of weeks or like about a month off from racing, we'll get back into it with the Rolex 24. It kind of is the spearheader of the motorsport calendar for the usual year. So 2021 is shaping up to be quite the season for a lot of different things. So we'll get to do a full season from the green flag here next year. Yes. So stay tuned for that. But that's all the news and notes I've really got for this show, Kyle. Any final thoughts for this one as we wrap up today's episode?
Yeah, just let's hope that we can finish the F1 season with this so much entertainment, because, man, this weekend was so great. IMSA was great as well from what I got to saw, and obviously the highlights there between the 31 and the number 6 were definitely the highlight of it all. But yeah, just a fantastic overall weekend of racing. Gonna lighten up obviously as the weeks go on and the championships start to close. Obviously IMSA done now, NASCAR done for over a week now. And yeah, I know it hurts to say, but you know what? The news will keep coming thick and fast, and before we know it, it'll be the turn of the new year. Rolex 24 will be coming up, and all of a sudden we'll be talking Daytona 500 prep.
Yeah, we've got plenty of things left to go here on the green flag for this season. We'll do an award show here at some point in time for the NASCAR season. Yes. That was when we get some time, probably when school's over, to be honest. But we will find time to do that and just look back on the year that was in motorsports. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, this has been this episode of the Green Flag. Make sure you go to subscribe to the channel, leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it as well, and follow us on Instagram as well at the Green Flag there. So we've got some exciting content coming up, maybe a Twitter account in the near future as well. So we'll see how that goes. So keep your eye out peeled for that. But nonetheless, I've been Lukas Wacker. He's been Kyle Cushman. Signing off for now. We will talk to you later this week where we'll see what news transpires in the world of motorsports.